Kim Bremer, your host today for another edition of BoviNews, keeping you up to date on the cattle industry's latest in technology, management, genetics, and more. For decades, the production and marketing of semen by AI companies was pretty straightforward. But in recent years, the emergence of new technologies and the evolution of management practices are key factors that have changed how AI companies market semen to dairy and beef producers. In today's BoviNews webinar, we're going to hear from two experts who can shed light on how AI companies have adapted over time to meet customer needs in this changing semen landscape. Our first presenter is Mitch Hockett with STgenetics. Mitch received his master's and doctorate in reproductive physiology. He served as a professor in animal science at North Carolina State University, where he taught reproductive physiology, dairy evaluation, and coached the judging team. Mitch was a partner and manager of Kings Mill Farms. For 8 years, he was VP of External Research and Technical Marketing for Advanced Animal Diagnostics, a startup focused on developing diagnostic tests for subclinical mastitis and respiratory disease in cattle. Since joining STgenetics in 2020, Mitch has managed the technical and sales services team, and he continues to breed and have a deep passion for purebred dairy cattle. Welcome, Mitch.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and talk a little bit today about how innovations in artificial insemination and technologies in general have been able to impact our dairy producers favorably. You know, when you think about the image that is portrayed here, you notice that there are similarities. There's something that all of these individual photos, these modes of transportation have in common. And really, they're quite different when you think about them, but they all start with one core thing at the heart of them, and that's the wheel. An invention such as the wheel can have lots of applications, and over time, what we may learn is that we can apply that invention to other spaces. And when we do that in technology, we call that innovation. The invention being the original wheel, the innovation being other uses and technologies applied or layered over the top of that original invention that bring about change, whether that's a favorable mode of transportation or in the case of artificial insemination in the AI industry. We think that artificial insemination may be an example of that invention. And over time, we've learned that there are other things that we could layer over the top of AI to bring value to dairies. Innovations such as in vitro fertilization, multiple ovulation, and embryo transfer were born on the backs of the invention of artificial insemination. And since those early years, other innovations and breakthroughs have also benefited the industry. Things like gender-sorted semen, high purity gender-sorted semen, and even applications of those in different management strategies can be considered innovation, such as a sexed and beef management model. And we'll talk a little bit more about those final three in this discussion. Now, the commercial AI industry in cattle really was introduced around 1937. And from that time until around 54, the commercial AI industry was really reliant on use of fresh sex-sorted semen. But in the 50s, frozen sex-sorted semen became commercially viable. And between that and expansion of progeny testing programs in 1950, this graph to the right demonstrates that milk production drastically increased by over about 500% over that next 80 to 100 years. So these technological breakthroughs layered on with innovation have led to genetic progress that's helped impact milk production. And you know, the old proverb that necessity is the mother of invention would be true here. One of the things that was learned very quickly is that if we want to make genetic progress, we know the formula for genetic progress. If we intensify our selection and reduce the generation interval, we can have faster impact on the progress that is made. And back in the late 80s, Larry Johnson and others published this paper where they were demonstrating the ability to gender sort sperm and lead to live births. And this was a very, very early version of the technology. But the impetus behind this was necessity. It was that we wanted to make faster genetic progress. And so, if we could intensify our selection on the very elite animals and lead to faster generation interval by using younger animals and generating our replacements in a targeted way using gender sorted sperm, then that could lead to faster genetic progress. However, as that early product was released, it was pretty clear that the product was somewhat lacking in the efficiency in which it could achieve fertilization and lead to pregnancies. In fact, Foote, in a review in 1999, made an interesting comment that sex bull sperm happened in the 90s and it was improved, but it had limited potential application. And it's interesting to look back after about 20 years of continued development, how that statement has been proven to be quite incorrect. And maybe another quote to bring up at this point is by Joseph Jastrow: "Inventions become perfect by slow improvement, and each step is itself an invention." That couldn't be any more true than as we look at gender sorted sperm. What we do know is that continuous advancement in gender sorting has led to ever improvement product performance. And that original product, as we look at this chart, back in the early uh, era of after the release of that, there was quite a disparity between conventional rates of conception using a conventional product versus a gender sorted product. But around 2015, ST released a Sext Ultra technology based product, and we saw a drastic improvement in performance with about an 8% conception rate gain over the older technology that had been used previously. And then again in around 2017, launched the Sext Ultra 4M product and saw another 3% improvement. And so, as invention is continuously improved and layers of invention are released, we see constant and ever improving performance. One example of this in this trial, reported by Lentz and others, was if when comparing the traditional XY method of sorting sperm versus our Sext Ultra at a lower concentration and a higher concentration, we saw that improvements had been made, and a 56-day non-return rate of the standard at the time of our product, Sext Ultra 4M, was not statistically different from conventional. And so this goes to show that different inventions have improved products over time, and that all sex sorted semen products are not the same, quite honestly. If we look at what was initially launched versus what's commercially available today, there's been tremendous improvement. And that has impacted usage. If you look at the NAB database, you can find that over the past 10 years, there's been a tremendous shift in the industry in the percentage of inseminations that were from conventional dairy semen, with a reduction from around 98% to 46%, and the percentage that are sex dairy going from less than 1% in 2010 to 28% in 2020. At the same time, the remainder of the doses or inseminations have shifted from less than 1% beef to over 26% beef. So this invention of sex sorted semen and the improvements of it over time have enabled a change in management strategy to lead to both faster genetic progress and increased revenue. And that's by using and implementing a beef on dairy strategy. And so I'd like to talk just a little bit about how we can add value to our dairies using this strategy. And maybe the best way to do that is just to take an example of, here's two heifers, actual live heifers on a dairy, calf 818 and 808. And these two, visibly, you could not really tell much difference between them. But with another invention, the advent of genomic testing, we can test these two and learn that they're quite different in their ability to produce. And 808 would definitely be the animal here that would be superior. And 818 is one that, in an ideal world, we would cull immediately out of the hutches to reduce their investment in growing and developing her and eliminate those genetics from future generations in the herd. But where these two started is an interesting tale. Uh, the dam of 808 was actually in the top 25% of the herd, and the dam of 818 was in the bottom 20% of the herd. So if we had taken a different approach and had a strategy to test these animals, we could identify the top and bottom cows in the herd, and then we can make targeted matings that drive profit. If we had taken that approach, uh, quite honestly, calf 818 would have never been created. We would have targeted beef semen into the dam of this calf and resulted in a pregnancy that increased the profit to the farm by creating a higher value beef calf. So, in a whole herd approach, the way this may look is that typically we don't really know the genetic value of all of our animals when they're randomly mated in a population. But through the advent of genomic testing, we can actually rank these animals, identify those that are superior or have superior genetics for the herd that we want to perpetuate in future generations. And we can target our heifer creation from those using sexed sorted semen. By doing this, we limit the number of animals that we're creating future generations from. We target that to the highest value females in the herd. And then we expand the opportunity on the bottom end of the herd to bring in revenue from beef. And it's important to note that we don't just want to know those of the lowest genetic value. We should also be identifying animals that are haplotype carriers because it's been proven that those have a negative effect on fertility and are negatively associated with lower fertility, even in the carrier state. So we should be eliminating those animals from the herd and their genetics from being perpetuated in the herd by targeting beef breedings on those and a terminal cross. Uh, Now, there has been other invention, and more recently, STgenetics has released a high purity product, a product we call Sexed Ultra 4M HP. As I mentioned before, all sex sorted semen is not the same, and we have Sexed Ultra 4M and Sexed Ultra 4M HP. The difference between those is that HP, as the name implies, has a higher purity of female sperm represented in the straw, and resulting calf ratios would indicate a higher female ratio. Therefore, to achieve a similar number of heifers, as in this example, we need 500 heifers created for the farm. With a higher purity product, we can use less doses of semen, and the calves resulting will have fewer dairy bull calves that have a lower value and an expanded opportunity to create more beef calves. And this brings in um, this sexton beef management strategy, but elevated to a new level with a higher purity product, and that expands the overall opportunity for increased revenue. The interesting thing is that this management strategy doesn't just increase revenue from beef; it also has a positive impact on herd genetics. And as this graph would represent, as a model validated by Victor Cabrera at UW-Madison, that in the yellow bars, with an existing a conventional semen program, we make very slow genetic progress over time because the resulting heifers come from a random assortment of females in the population, and some may be from the lower animals of the herd. But because we're not making enough heifers, we keep them all. And this sexed and beef type strategy, we can make much faster genetic progress in the herd because we're targeting where those genetics are coming from and eliminating the negative genes in the herd. So this is a win-win situation for the dairy because with sex ultra 4M semen that's high purity, we use fewer doses, we get increased selection intensity, therefore making faster genetic progress and an expanded opportunity for revenue from beef. And so this sort of management strategy combined allows us to have the greatest profit potential for the farm. So I'd summarize this by again just repeating that first quote from Joseph Jastrow, that inventions become perfect by slow improvement, and each step is itself an invention. That's an important point for sex sorted semen. We know that the original version of the product had limited capability in a commercial setting, but every step of improvement along the way has brought about advantages both in performance of the product itself, but in how it expanded the opportunity to be implemented in other management strategies that brought value to the farm. So I would recommend farms embrace innovation and technology, especially once it's been proven. And realize that all value in the semen straw doesn't rest in the genetics in the straw itself. Within that straw, there's also different inventions, innovations, and technologies that set it apart. And there will constantly be improvement in all products. So we should be looking for those improvements and realizing that the product of yesterday is not the product today or of tomorrow. The next point I would make is that small changes to where and how we apply technology via management strategies can greatly impact the farm. So having that mindset of this is how we've always done it can be really dangerous when we look at competitive advantages in the industry. We can make just a small change to where we apply this technology and have a tremendous impact in payback. And finally, try to expand the profit centers on your dairies, both by making more rapid genetic advancement that will impact production and longevity of the herd, but also in expanding the beef revenue centers that the lower end of the herd can create. With that, I thank you, and we'll take any questions.
Our next presenter is Claire Mulligan. Claire was born and raised on a dairy farm in Western New York and graduated from Cornell University in 2015 with a degree in animal science. After working for 2 years in the Southeast for a genetics company, she moved back to New York and began working for ABS in 2017. In her current role as a strategic account manager for the Eastern U.S., Claire works with customers to increase profitability of their business through genetics and reproduction management. Claire is a vice president of her county farm bureau and a committee member for the Northeast Regional Dairy Challenge, where she served as a mentor and a judge. She's an active member of the Genesee Valley Fox Hunt and rides competitively. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you, Kim, for that introduction. I'm really excited to talk to you about the changes that we've seen in the AI industry in the last few years. So I wanted to start out first by just looking at this from the dairy business perspective, from the farmer's perspective. I work primarily in the field, so this is mainly how I look at how this business has changed. So from the dairy farm perspective, there was a desire to create the correct number of replacements. A lot of times farms historically have over-created replacements in their herd. A lot of that was due to just improved management practices, lower death loss in calves and heifer facilities, and sex semen as well. So there was a real desire to create the correct number instead of over-creating, a lot due to feed costs and replacement costs, labor, and then purely because of the market that there was for heifers. Oftentimes the cost of purchasing heifers was even lower than raising your own replacements. And then also a lot of people saw the potential for increased revenue from that beef calf supply chain, where they could create beef calves from those extra animals that they didn't need replacements out of. Other areas that they saw looking for improvements or at least sustainability was reproduction performance in their artificial insemination programs, as well as genetic improvement. So from the company perspective, we wanted to be able to help farms capitalize on these opportunities. So what this led to, the top things that I can see are an increased investment in beef on dairy research and development, an increased in quality and diversity of genetics, and then a bit of evolution of the service and support that AI companies can provide to our customers. So first, I wanted to just give you a timeline of the ABS investment on the beef on dairy research and investment that we've done. So this is just to give you an idea of where we started and where we are now. So this project for beef on dairy started way back in 2011, and it was a concept that is not new. The UK has been doing using beef on dairy programs for a lot longer than us. So it kind of evolved from there to meet the needs of the US dairy customer. So we've done a lot of trials, working on fertility in trials and results, all the way up to from the fertility conception rates on the farm, calving ease, and days carried calf, all the way up to what that carcass looks like on the end user side, what the packer sees and wants. So there was a lot of research and investment into this that never had really happened before when we were purely creating dairy genetics. So this beef on dairy project has evolved quite a bit along the way. Looking at this, so again, from the dairy farmer perspective, all the way up to the retailer side. So from the farm perspective, what does the dairy farmer need? They need calving performance, they need conception rate, and they need easy marketability of these calves. So there are certainly niche areas where beef on dairy can work, but most of the time these dairy customers are looking for a calf that is openly accessible to the market, that appeals to a broader market. The calf raisers and the finishers are looking for feed efficiency, quick growth, and lower days on feed. So we've been working with a lot of calf raisers and finishers to modify those genetics to find the perfect blend of the dairy on beef animal that gets as quickly to finish as possible. And then for the processors, what is the value of that carcass? We want to make sure that not only does the animal get to slaughter quickly, but also that the carcass has a high value and is consistent all the way through the supply chain. So those retailers, food service businesses are looking for consistency, the same looking cut every day, every time on the shelves for customers. So moving away from the beef on dairy. So we have two sides to this. We've got the beef on dairy investment, which has been huge and has evolved very quickly to meet the demands. And then we have the sex semen side of things. And on that, we found that people are looking to create a greater emphasis of genetic selection on farm. Mitch talked about this a little bit, and I thought it was great. The genetics that we have in the herd on the maternal side are just as important as the bulls that we select on the sire side. So when we can figure out which animals are the best animals in our herd on the maternal side, whether that be purely on parent average or more accurately using a genomic test, we can select those animals to create the next generation of our herd and influence multiple generations down the road of that herd. We've also seen a bigger demand for more specialty genetics, beta and cappy caseins, pole genetics, as well as looking for inbreeding management. So trying to reduce inbreeding as well as haplotype incidence on the farm. So that has led to a greater push for us to diversify our genetics as well as increase the quality of our genetics on the dairy side. Another big thing that we've seen is purely just when we're making sex semen from a logistics standpoint, it takes more product to create fewer straws. what we found with using more sex semen is that we need more bulls. We are using younger bulls with higher genetic merit. And since they produce less semen, we need more of them. So what we've done at ABS is build more barns. And this is actually an older photo. The building site there is now actually filled in with barns. And a lot of those barns are have beef and focus bulls, have beef bulls in there. So it's really interesting. If you walked through a bull barn, an AI stud 10 years ago, it would be all Holsteins, all Jerseys. Now you walk through some of these barns and there's a lot of beef bulls in there. It's very different to see. And then along with that quality of genetics is our research and development around sex semen. So very similar in talking about, we still need fertility and we need purity. We need to make sure that when a cow is bred to sex semen or a heifer is bred to sex semen, that we can very close to guarantee that they're going to have a heifer calf. When we make that investment in starting with our best female genetics in the herd, we want the result that the best heifer calf is landing on the ground. That is our future generation for the herd. And finally, and I think this is probably my biggest passion because it's what I do, but there's a huge amount of service and support that goes along with this changing landscape of the type of product that we are selling. So it goes back to that female side, first and foremost, of which animals are we selecting to propagate the next generation of the herd, which animals are getting sex semen, and then subsequently which animals are getting beef. And that requires careful analysis of the herd and analysis of the goals of the herd. What is the end goal of the herd? Is it to grow? Is it to maintain herd size? Is it to maximize genetic potential? Is it to maximize reproductive performance? So all of these things we need to take into account when we're talking to customers about what product types they want to use and what their goals are in the future. So I think we've really taken a step forward as far as the support that we can provide customers, as far as in reproduction and genetics expertise, and then the monitoring and the follow-up of these changes that we make. So when a herd takes the step to go from 100% conventional usage to a sexed and beef model, whether that's in incremental steps and we do it slowly, or whether we jump in head first, we need to be able to monitor that so that the creation of replacements is steady and sufficient for what the herd's size goals are and that sort of thing, as well as keeping up with management. If there's large changes to the management or something happens, we need to be able to catch that quickly. So if a herd is creating the exact number of replacements that they want, we are not over creating and costing extra money, and we're not under creating and forcing a need to either purchase replacements or make other changes. So I think this is probably one of the biggest changes. There's a lot of technology that's changed. So I think that finally, that the most important thing is that when we're implementing these ideas and processes, that we follow up with that so that the farm is creating exactly the right number of replacements, and that they're doing it in a way that creates the most profitability for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So a couple of questions for the two of you. There is this increasing focus on beef genetics as the dairy industry is a significant supplier to the beef industry. Have we seen the same sort of semen evolution and technology in the beef industry? I'll start with you, Mitch.
So artificial insemination in the beef industry only occurs on probably about 10% or fewer of the breeding. So AI in general is not as widely used or accepted as it is in dairy. With that being said, there is some evolution there. So the advent of genomic testing has improved and been important, will continue to grow in importance in the beef industry, just from the accuracy of EPDs of bulls that are used there, which with a parent average are only in the 30% range. So improving the accuracy of those traits of economic importance to the beef industry is also impacting the success of programs there. But because of the limited scope of AI in the beef industry, it hasn't had as big of an impact on the national cow herd and has pretty much been limited in scope mostly to seed stock producers. I would say, not to be too long winded, that when we talk about beef on dairy applications, there's a trickle through effect for both groups. So if we make improvement on feed efficiency or performance and gain on beef bulls that can affect the beef industry, we can capitalize on those same traits in the beef on dairy sector as well. And that is a focus of our group, much like Claire mentioned in there. So I think that's a nationwide or global area of emphasis.
Has this trend been seen on a global basis? Have other regions adopted the management practices that have changed how semen is produced and marketed? We'll start with you, Claire.
Yeah, so I mentioned it a little bit before, but the UK has definitely led the charge in the beef on dairy sector, and I think a little bit it's due to the markets there. You know, the ability to expand herd size is not nearly what it is in the US, so it was a bit out of necessity. I think we've seen it a little bit in South America as well, but not quite to the extent. It definitely seems like the US is leading the charge with regards to what we've seen in the last few years.
Mitch, global basis perspective?
Yeah, I would agree with Claire on those points. I think that a lot of that is driven by the value of that beef cross calf in the industry, and obviously in the United States, we've had some things happen to the national beef cow herd that's reduced numbers, and that's driven the need for more beef entering the food supply chain from the dairy side. And granted, all those Holstein bull calves were entering the beef chain already, but having a more favorable product that fits the market better to maintain value, that's been of value. The only other thing I would add to Claire's answer is that we do see some places in say the Chinese market for example, where that beef cross calf doesn't have as much value relative to the dairy bull calf. And part of that's just because of the way meat is prepared, or the demand for certain products may not drive that increased value. And there's substantial need to create as many heifers as possible at this time with a growing industry. So I think in general, this is a growing trend. We obviously, the Australia and New Zealand markets, we're seeing some growth in this way. And especially in locations where jerseys or jersey crosses are predominant, where male calves have very little to almost no value, and actually create an animal welfare concern in how they could be managed. There is a growing value or acceptance of beef as an alternative on the terminal side for crossing on the low end of the herd.
How has the ratio of semen sales changed over time, from conventional to sex to now beef on dairy? I'm assuming you have both seen this.
Yes, absolutely. So we've seen just personal experience. When I first started out, when I graduated, all I worked with was conventional semen, and now pretty much all I talk about is beef on dairy and sex semen, and conventional very rarely enters the picture. So it's changed very quickly, and conventional at this point is pretty much a secondary or really tertiary product, whereas it was originally the biggest thing that we produced and sold.
And I'm assuming, Mitch, have you seen a similar trend?
Yeah, similar trend on air side. I think we're selling into the same market, so we see the same changes, but about 50% drop in a drastic, even in the last 10 years in conventional use. But over the past 2 years, that number is dropping precipitously. Sex, on the opposite hand, has had a similar rise. And I think the adaptation of this sexed and beef model and the revenue generation, like understanding that there is a revenue generating source on the farm that's just in the uteruses of the cows, and what you choose to put in those uteri from a semen product standpoint has big impact to the financials on the dairy, has driven a lot of this change recently on the beef on dairy semen sales.
And how about marketing and communications and advertising to producers? How has that changed over time?
So what we've seen is really that well, there's purely product marketing, but I've seen a changeover with us to marketing the potential, genetic potential, and the potential in your herd. Like Mitch said, every single animal has the potential to create a replacement or a beef calf. Every single dairy cow ultimately ends up in the beef supply chain. So it's really just how we decide um, to how long they're going to last in the dairy, and how when they end up in the beef supply chain. So what I've seen is a real shift from just marketing based on individual bulls, and this is the best bull that we have, to how can we select genetics that work best in your herd, from both the beef and the dairy side.
Yeah, I guess maybe I interpreted the question a little differently, Kim. For us, the marketing that we're doing, I think we're seeing much more online presence. We're using social media as a much more vital tool in the marketing and advertising that we're doing. As far as individual bulls, I think I do. If that was the interpretation, I should have taken another question. I would agree with Claire that many of our dairies are focused on merit-based indices that are looking at long-term value of that animal's on the dairy side, and so whether that's cheese merit or net merit, most of those now are putting more emphasis on protein and fat and solids down the road, and less emphasis on shipping pounds of fluid. And I think that's in most of our markets, other than the Southeast United States here in the US, those would be the primary selection indices. So we do see emphasis on fat and protein. And then on the beef side, we have a tremendous investment in R&D, much like Claire mentioned in their group, where we're focused on residual feed intake, feed efficiency, and performance of those beef dairy cross calves, as well as impetus for health. But we also need to consider that as we invest in feed efficiency and traits like eco-feed that we market in the dairy space, that half of the genetics for those beef cross calves are coming from the dairy herd. So investment in genetics for feed efficiency, residual feed intake, or eco-feed that impacts the dairy herd also trickle through the beef industry and have a positive impact on those cross calves as well.
So, as we wrap this up and along those lines, Mitch, what does the future hold? Are there factors evolving that will change the semen production and marketing landscape even further?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You always wish you had a crystal ball for questions like that. I think that um, as the one thing that's certain is that we know the population of the world is growing, and we've got to meet the need for that. We also know that consumers have a bigger voice than ever, and their focus, at least as have been reported in multiple surveys from different companies, has been a real focus on knowing where food comes from, how it's raised, and so we constantly will see more pressure on animal welfare, which all of our producers are interested in anyway, because we know that happy, healthy animals are more productive. Um, So that's been aligned with our producers all along. But we also are now seeing more emphasis globally on sustainability message, on pressures for maintaining and managing the carbon cycle, methane production. All of those are more not just buzzwords in the industry, but places where you can see investment. We certainly have invested in understanding how breeding feed efficiency into our animals actually decreases the carbon footprint and leads to more sustainability in the industry, both from a land base and resources there, but also for water utilization. And I think that that is kind of the direction that we see things moving here in the next decade.
Claire, how about your crystal ball? What do you think the future holds?
Well, I definitely agree with Mitch. Sustainability it's both. It's a buzzword and it is the future that we have to work towards. Every single day we see different opportunities to create more sustainable food sources, genetics and genetic improvement being a huge part of that. The beef on dairy story is really cool for the dairy industry because we're able to create a beef supply chain through what we're already doing on the dairy side. I think that's really exciting. And if we can help to emphasize that a little bit, then we're definitely on our way to helping improve that sustainability side in the dairy industry. I think also along those genetic improvement lines, there's so much technology that we can keep working towards that accelerates that genetic progress. So embryos, genomic testing being a couple of those technologies, and I'm sure there will be more and better improvements of that along the lines. But as we improve the health of our herds, the ability to create more feed efficient animals, but also healthier animals that we're treating less and that require less labor to manage, the more we can create that sustainable food source.
Well said. My thanks to both of you. Mitch, Claire, thanks for taking the time with us today and sharing your invaluable expertise and experience. Don't forget to subscribe to the BoviNews channel on YouTube, find our BoviNews podcasts on your favorite listening platform, or find more information at bovinews.com. Thanks for tuning in with us today. We'll see you next time on another edition of BoviNews.